I got 4 cops, 3 PIs, and a running back.
Welcome to episode 239 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 239. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. So I wanted to give a update. Those of you who have purchased Prime numbers and read it, I am hard at work still on the sequel. I am approximately 85 to maybe 90% done with it. I had to take a giant pause while I worked on marketing stuff. Marketing takes a lot out of you. But I am up to date on my promos for about the next, 12 days, I think. So I'll be back into the book and hopefully be able to finish the last 15% of the book. I'm in a good place with it. I'm going to have to go back and do some re-edits because as I've been going through here, I realized, there's stuff in the initial that I really need to go back and revise, and then we'll go into editing and proofreading, and then we'll go into the publishing process all over again. I am hopeful the sequel will be out by March. Sorry, I'm putting on a wrist brace. I've got a little bit of tendonitis in my wrist. We're a mess here at this house. Chelsea just had surgery on her elbow, and now I've got tendonitis in my wrist. We're broken. But anyway, that's where we are in the sequel. Zig, where are you in your book?
I am about a third of the way through on my third draft.
Cool.
I incorporated some of the ideas that Geoffrey had given me. It's like, hey, maybe you should pause here or give some more background on this person.
Yep.
Because
Awesome.
I wasn't sure where it sucked. Because again, as I said before, in my ADHD brain, it's hard for me to explain. How do you not know pattern here? But did you lose me?
Yeah, a little bit. I lost you. You'd said in your ADH brain, then I lost you a little bit.
Okay.
What was repeat that, please? In your ADH brain.
In my ADH brain, I see the patterns and how they should work out, and sometimes I have a hard time explaining how that happens.
Yeah. No, and that's absolutely correct. As I wrote Prime numbers, I knew the story and I knew how it should flow and I knew what was going on, and I had to have other people read it and tell me, well, hey, this doesn't make sense, or I don't understand this. How did we get here? And so I had to go back and edit some stuff, and that's absolutely how it goes. It's a process. The whole writing thing is a process. So no, I'm happy that you are where you are with that. I just wanted to give everybody updates on those so that they were aware. But that's all I got. You got anything? Are you ready to step into the nerdery side of the house?
Kind of ready to talk about 4 buddy cop movies.
Go for
it. So today we're talking about 4 buddy cop movies. Now, before, the criteria with these has always been, well, they have to be cops. Not necessarily. Private investigators work. For the sake of the genre is called buddy cop movies, but it's buddy investigator movies. And I pulled 4 of them, each from a different decade. One from 1974, one from 1986, one from 1991, and one from 2016. Or 2016. The first one we're going to start with is the one that a lot of people define as the originator of the genre itself. It is Freebie and the Bean. It's a 1974 American buddy cop black comedy action film starring James Caan and Alan Arkin. It's directed by Richard Rush. The film follows 2 police detectives who wreak havoc in San Francisco, attempting to bring down an organized crime boss. The film, which has been originally scripted as a serious crime drama, morphed into what is now known as the buddy cop genre due to the bantering, improvisational nature of the the acting of James Caan and Alan Arkin. Reportedly, by the end of the film, both actors were confused by the purpose of the movie. Not knowing what they had stumbled into a successful character formula, the film was popular enough to spawn various other successful film franchises such as Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop. Loretta Swit and Valerie Harper.
You said Loretta Swit?
Loretta Swit,
Oh, okay.
and Valerie Harper appeared in supporting roles as well.
Did Loretta Swit just die?
Yes. I think we just lost Valerie Harper, too.
Did we? I don't know that I knew that.
I think so.
Huh. Okay.
Freebie and the Bean are a pair of maverick detectives with the San Francisco Police Department Intelligence Squad. The volatile, gratuity-seeking Freebie is trying to get promoted to the Vice Squad to garner perks for his retirement, while the neurotic and fastidious Bean has ambitions to make a lieutenant. Against the backdrop of the Super Bowl weekend in San Francisco, the partners are trying to conclude a 14-month investigation, digging through garbage to gather evidence against well-connected racketeering Red Myers. When they discover that the hitman from Detroit is after Myers as well, after projecting their pretext arrest of Myers to protect him, the district attorney orders them to keep him alive until Monday. The film was based on an original script by Floyd Muttrix, who originally intended to produce his own property. In April of 1972, he sold it to Warner Brothers. Muttrix maintains that he'd gotten offers from other studios, but elected to go to the Warners because he felt the studio's vice president, Richard Zanuck, was the straightest shooter I've ever known. The comedy followed on the heels of two popular action films about San Francisco police, i.e. Bullet in 1968 and Dirty Harry in 1971, and incorporated plot elements prominent in both. James Caan later called the film sort of the Odd Couple in a squad car detectives. Hopefully funny. Muttrix claimed Al Pacino was offered one of the leads, but was against. But his agent requested $250,000 plus a percentage of the profits, so Warner went to James Caan. The casting happened in June, and by August, Richard Rush was attached to direct. Rush described the original script as about two corrupt cops who ride around in a police car, quarreling with each other like an old married couple. They were never sure which one was the wife and which one was the husband. They became interchangeable. There was also the somewhat clumsy, rough skeleton of the plot concerning a criminal that they must keep alive to testify, while assassins are contracted to kill him, which survived through our final film screenplay. I liked the ideas, but there was nothing else there to make the movie work. So basically, what they told James Caan and Alan Arkin to do was to play off of each other. And they get into the scene, they know what it was about, and then they just start rolling camera on them. This is back in the studio days where they could afford wasting film, basically. And then there was a time where we couldn't do that, and now you can because there is no film to waste. You just roll and get the best stuff you need. But because they were able to ad-lib and work together and bounce off of each other, there's a riff in this that just is amazing. So in October, Alan Arkin signed on to co-star. Rush says Callie, who had worked with Arkin on Catch-22, warned the director that Arkin was a director killer, but Rush insisted. Before filming, Rush worked on the script with two stars and Kaufman in several improvisational sessions. Rush says, at my suggestion, they turned what had originally been serious drama into this bizarre comedy. Slowly, the relationship took on the pains and pleasures of a friendship neither could live with or without. Arkin admits that it was Rush's idea to turn the film into a comedy. I hadn't thought about it. I didn't see it in the script. But the filming did take place over 11 weeks in 1973. It was a difficult shoot in part because Arkin and Caan felt their characters were being made secondary to stunts and action sequences. Arkin said his relationship with Caan was great. There's a very exciting interaction between us. Jimmy pushed me and forced me to change, but a lot of the time we'd take a backseat to the action. There were difficulties between Rush and Arkin and Caan. Rush says the main factor was Arkin. Caan was a copycat. He was Arkin's buddy and would do anything Arkin did. Arkin needed conflict as part of his method, and it was horribly disruptive, but it didn't show in his work. The plot includes protagonists' repeated totaling of a series of their own unmarked police cars. So Freebie and the Bean has a lot of car crashes in it. Like, at one point, they just drive through a building, and then they do it again, and then they
Well,
start yelling at each other for driving through the building.
it's been a long time since I've seen a long time since I've seen this, but this is very, um, very 70s. Pure
Yes.
insanity. Blues
Yeah.
Brothers hit this note.
Hmm.
Cars crashing into everything. The whole mall scene in Blues Brothers is just utter insanity as they're
Spinning
driving through the
police
mall.
car. That's right.
And what's best about that scene is that the Blues Brothers, Jake and Elwood, are driving through the mall, very calmly talking about the new
Yeah.
things in the
Oh,
mall.
look, Pier 1.
Yes. And this is one of those too. This is just it's utter insanity. It's one of those films that make you wonder, how do these characters still have jobs?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, why weren't they fired day one? Well, because
Yes,
everybody in San Francisco in the 70s was corrupt. That's why.
right.
That's a supposition of the film.
Yeah, as I said, I have not seen this in a very long time, but I do remember it.
I watched this when we were putting this together because I was like, I really ought to do Free and the Bean, but it's been so long since I've seen it. I sat down and watched it. I was like, God damn, this movie's still great.
Actually, none of these four have I seen recently. It's just, they're all movies I've seen a long time ago.
I have seen all four of these. Well, like I said, I was written these notes like 4 or 5 months ago. So 4 or 5 months ago. So recently. Um, so yeah, I can recommend this one wholeheartedly. James Caan and Alan Arkin are great in this, but don't discount Loretta Swit and Valerie Harper either. Really great, and a lot of character actors. There is a lot of action, like you said. It's kind of insanity. The next film, goodness gracious, I scrolled past my own notes. Is Running Scared. It was released in 1986. It is an American action comedy film directed by Peter Hyams and written by Gary DeVore and Jimmy Houston. It stars Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal as two Chicago police officers who attempt to bring down a drug dealer before they retire. The film was released by Metro Goldwyn Mayer on June 27, 1986. It received mixed reviews with praise for the performances of Hines and Crystal, but criticism for its mix of action and comedy, and grossed over $38 million. In 2010, Hyams recalled that he wanted to remain earthbound and desired a comedy that was not stupid, where the action was not mean-spirited or bloody or graphic. MGM's script about retiring New York cops turned into a tale of non-retiring young Chicago cops, offering fresh casting possibilities in a unique city backdrop. He noted that amidst numerous cop movies, he chose to opt for more unconventional actors and chose Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines, who proved to have great chemistry. Hines persistently campaigned for his role, proud that the film featured a black guy with sex scenes, deviating from the norm, the black characters being devoid of sexuality. As opposed to his white counterpart, he recalled that Hyams was tough to work with, but he still didn't want to put that guy down. Crystal, valued for his improvisational skills, contributed little pearls to the script, supported by Hines' chemistry. He noted that his risky improvisations were only possible due to Hines' solid presence. Filming spanned September 85 to January 86 across MGM Studios in Culver City, California, in addition to location work in Key West and Chicago. So it takes place in Chicago, not New York. These two cops run afoul of this gangster played by Jimmy Smits. They actually get him caught and get him put behind bars, but they start talking that there's word on the streets that the gangster is really pissed at these two and is going to put out a hit on them, right? They also grab well, wait, that happens later. So their chief is like, you two need to get out of town. You both have vacation time. And the department, since you have to leave town because all of the shit that's going down, you two leave town, go on vacation. The department will pay for your trip to go there, and you guys just hang out and enjoy yourselves. I think they made them leave for like 4 weeks, right? Also, there's another two detectives on the narco squad who were involved in this rundown, who kind of got the credit for it, but the gangster knows that it's these two. So these two go to Key West. They were like, well, let's go as far south as we can because it's snowing. Let's go as far south as we can in the U.S. without having to have passports. So they go all the way down to Key West, and they're in Key West. They're hanging out, and they're like, what? Everybody's standing there staring at something. They're like, what? Was there a robbery? Do we need to help? And they're like, no, we're watching the sunset. And they're like, what? And they go and they watch the sunset. And then they decide they want to live in Key West. They go and they buy a bar. And they realize they're going to retire. That they've got enough time in. They've both been in the department for 25 years and they can retire. So they go back, after the 4 weeks mandated, and the two other detectives are kind of taking the reins of what they're doing. They come back and say, we're going to retire. And their captain is like, what are you two going to do? Open a bar? Like he knew what they were going to go down there and do. Played by Dan Hedaya so well. He's like, okay, you guys are on borrowed time. I want you to teach these two idiots what you know, and then you can leave. But be careful, because the idea was once they decided to retire, he was like, that's when people get shy. The captain's real superstitious. So they go downstairs to the motor pool. They get a police car and make it look like a taxi cab and put bulletproof windows all around it, but they can't roll the windows down to shoot out, which they discover later on. And so they're trying to be safe. But this drug dealer wants to kill them on sight. So, and he gets out. They end up catching this guy named Snake, who was working with the drug dealer, played adeptly by Joey Pants. He is so good as Snake. And one of my favorite lines of all time is in this film. Gregory Hines looks at him and says, why'd they call you Snake? You got a long wee-wee? And it's so off the cuff, and they're just walking. And I cannot stop laughing every time I hear it.
Well, and that's kind of a big part of Running Scared as well. There's so much good quotable dialogue in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one you're going to forget. The two guys have great chemistry. I mean, they feel like real friends in this, and it's genuinely funny.
Oh my God.
It's a lighter buddy cop movie, but it still has solid action. It's a really good movie.
It is. It's incredible. Standout performances of everybody involved: Jimmy Smits, Joey Pantoliano, just everybody in this film is hard-boiled police. Even Billy Crystal's ex-wife in this film is incredible, because it's like, oh yeah, she's the ex-wife of a cop. That just makes sense.
Mm.
But it's the little pearls of the goofy, and the goofy is understated. It's not goofy for the sake of goofy. It's goofy because that's how these two dudes talk to each other, because they've been working together for 20 years. It's amazing. And the scenes in Key West are great too, because you get to see what Key West looked like in the 1980s. About these two cops who go on vacation, basically paid for vacation. And they just basically fuck off. And it's like, you're watching this and it's like, oh my God, neither one of these guys have been off of work in a decade, and it shows. It's just brilliant and beautiful. I love this film. I've watched this movie several times.
I've seen it several times.
Yeah, it's great. And Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal, the way they play off each other. Because again, they're saying Billy Crystal could do these ad libs and drop these pearls in. So could Gregory Hines. Yes, we all think of Gregory Hines as a dancer primarily. Gregory Hines he's a showman. He, in the old vaudevillian sense of the word, and could play off the comedic stuff of Billy Crystal. and even taught Billy Crystal how to dance a little bit for some of this stuff, because there's a couple of scenes where he's teaching him how to do the dance. And a great song by Michael McDonald plays through the whole time they're at Key West. And they made a video of it with all of them in it, and it was brilliant, and it, played forever in 1985. The whole package is great. Yeah, Running Scared's fan-fucking-tastic. The next film I would not define as fantastic, but it is laudable. That is The Last Boy Scout. It is a 1991 American buddy action comedy film directed by Tony Scott from a screenplay by Shane Black and produced by Joel Silver, who also wrote and produced the next film as well. It stars Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans with Noble Willingham, Chelsea Field, Taylor Negron, and Danielle Harris. The film follows a washed-up private investigator, played by Bruce Willis, who teams up with a scandalized former football star, played by Damon Wayans, to uncover a political conspiracy involving their former employers. The film was released by Warner Brothers Pictures in the United States on December 13th, 1991, to mixed reviews and a smaller than expected box office. Retrospective reviews have been more positive, and the film has developed a bit of a cult following. During the halftime of a football game, the fake Los Angeles Stallions running back Billy Cole receives a call from Milo, Taylor Negron, a man who warns him to win the game or he will be killed. Cole ingests PCP and in a drug-induced rage brings a gun onto the field, shooting 3 opposing players to reach the end zone before shooting himself in the head. Meanwhile, private investigator Joe Hollenbeck, a disgraced former Secret Service agent who was once a national hero for saving the president from an assassination attempt, discovers that his wife Sarah is having an affair with his best friend and business partner Mike Matthews. After understanding this, Mike gives Joe an assignment to act as a bodyguard for a stripper named Corey. Mike is then killed by a car bomb outside of Joe's house. And when they say car bomb, dude gets into a Mustang 5.0 1990 Fox body Mustang, right? Gets in and it blows up, and that scene takes it's the whole fucking screen. I saw this in the theater and was like, God damn. Because they do a long shot of the car and then they do a close up of the car, and you get it from bumper to bumper, and it just explodes. There was no holding back on that explosion. They caught it. And it's loud and booming. The film was based on an original script by Shane Black. He wrote the script after having taken a 2-year break from writing, triggered in part by the end of a relationship. The Geffen Film Company outbid other companies, paying a record of $1.75 million for the script, with an over $1 million guaranteed up front. Black later recalled, "I was busy mourning my life and in many ways the loss of my first real love. I didn't feel much like doing anything except smoking cigarettes and reading paperbacks. All things come around, time passes, and eventually I sat down to transform some of that bitterness into a character, the central focus of a private eye story, which became The Last Boy Scout. Writing the script was a very cathartic experience, on the best experiences I've ever had. I spent so much time alone working on that, days which I wouldn't speak, 3, 4, where I maybe said a couple of words. It is a wonderful, intense time where my focus was better than it's ever been, and I was rewarded so handsomely, $1.75 million for that script. It felt like a vindication and like I was back on track." So, this guy, he didn't feel like doing anything except smoking cigarettes and reading paperbacks. Joe Hallenbeck in the film, that's what he does. I will say this, one of the people's problems with this film is the cigarette inconsistencies problem. Joe Hallenbeck is smoking a full cigarette, then he's smoking a half cigarette, then he's smoking a full cigarette again. This happens through the whole film, and he smokes through the whole movie. It's part of that character. He gets shit for it. You can't smoke that in here, and he smokes anyway. But there are a lot of cigarette inconsistencies which bug the fuck out of me. I know maybe I shouldn't be looking at them. I saw it at the Sundance in downtown Fort Worth, and I noticed it then. Um, it was filmed 90 days between March 11th and June 9th in 1991. Filming took place primarily in and around Los Angeles. The football stadium scenes were filmed at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum and San Diego Stadium. It had a very troubled production. Conflicts and arguments flared between Joel Silver, Bruce Willis, and Tony Scott. Although they partnered up in the film, Willis and Damon Wayans really disliked working with each other. Silver was described as insane and long, horrible fits of sanity, and was compared to a fighter pilot riding as a passenger. And as soon as you hit a little bit of turbulence, he's right away going to throw the guy out the window and take over the steering. Taylor Negron also remarked that Silver was directly involved throughout the production. Now, Taylor Negron is a consummate actor and performer, so whatever he says, I would take as actually being true. My problem with a lot of this is Damon Wayans and Bruce Willis are known for being difficult, both of them. And I think that's 90% of the problem with this film. As much as I like Bruce Willis as the guy who gets beat up and everything else, he's really not that good. He plays that character very well, but he really doesn't do anything else.
He plays all of his characters very well. He is good at doing what he does, and that's being Bruce Willis.
Yes,
that is being David Addison. That is being the tough guy. That is being his character in Pulp Fiction. All of that. That's just Bruce Willis being Bruce Willis. I have heard the exact same thing, that he's very difficult on set. His difficulty on set combined with Sybil Shepherd is what killed that show.
Yes.
You know, they versus the rumors we've heard from Castle is that it was Stanya Katic that was the problem in that show.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bruce Willis. And here's the problem with this movie. Because The Last Boy Scout, it's worth a watch. I've watched it once.
Great action scenes.
Yeah, it's great action scenes. It's peak early 90s action. It's big explosion and big attitudes. And there's where your problem is. I think you have such a big attitude in Bruce Willis and such a big attitude in Damon Wayans. It's too much.
Yeah.
Go back to Running Scared. Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines were big.
Oh yeah.
When this came out.
Yes.
But they weren't overpowering attitudes and overpowering egos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what kind of knocks this one down a little bit. I think it's worth a watch. It's not the one I would put in here. I mean, I would put in more known ones like Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours, Rush Hour, Tango and Cash. This one is a good one to put in here, and I think is worth a watch. It's very sharp, it's very dark, it's very violent. It's packed with one-liners, and it's the darkest of this bunch, but it still manages to be funny. But the problem with this, and I said it a minute ago, and I'm going to say it again. I think it was entirely too big of personalities for this movie.
Yeah. If they'd had two guys like Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal, this movie would have paid off. Although I don't think they could have used Billy Crystal as the bitter asshole character that is the Bruce Willis character. Oh my God.
Well,
Joe Hallenbeck.
Yeah. Well, hang on. Having big personalities can work if it's done right. Example, 48 Hours.
Yeah.
Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. Huge personalities. Yeah. It worked.
Works perfectly.
Tango and Cash. Stallone and Kurt Russell. Huge personalities, but it worked.
Worked perfectly.
In The Last Boy Scout.
Tango and Cash was kind of a weak story, and they pulled that fucker off.
Absolutely. But The Last Boy Scout, as much as, like I say, it deserves a watch, this is one where I think two big personalities didn't quite work. Yeah.
Well, and they were... So Shane Black had to wrestle with the script because they kept changing it. He had to do more rewrites. because Bruce Willis didn't like it, and then he would get it back, and then Damon Wayans would look at it and go, "Hey, you wrote me out of all of this. You need to add me back in." So there was so much of that going on that kind of left a bad taste in Shane Black's mouth. Even though writing this movie was one of the greatest times of his life, because he's never been, when he wrote that script, he was firing on all like cylinders. He did, and he not only did he get paid 1.75 mil for the script, he also got some back end money, and he got paid to be on site as a rewriter. That's a salaried gig on top of the 1.75 million. But Bruce Willis with, "I don't like this. You got to rewrite this." I'm glad he's not making pictures anymore. I really am, because, well, he's got some problems now. But he really made it hard for a lot of people to get work after working with him, including Kevin Smith. It's pretty hard to break off Kevin Smith from wanting to make films, but he did for a while after dealing with Bruce Willis. Because he basically wanted some glibness of David Addison, which Bruce Willis wasn't doing anything. And he gave him one scene, and Bruce Willis was kind of a dick and like, "Hey, there you go. There you are. There's the scene that you asked for. And please don't bother me anymore." It's like, dude, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? You're just, some jerk off from Jersey? Fuck you. Yes, okay, he's commanded millions and millions of dollars. He got lucky. He got lucky with a good casting in Die Hard, and before that, Moonlighting. If he hadn't gotten those roles, he'd be doing dinner theater in Poughkeepsie.
And I could see that. I could see that. I think Moonlighting was absolutely lightning in a bottle, but you could tell in the latter seasons how those personalities were starting to get in the way, because the latter
first two seasons of that show were great. Yeah,
they were brilliant. But you get to the latter seasons, and it failed from actually culminating into the romance versus having the hints at the romance and the dancing around it. You actually got into the romance, and things started to get weaker. And those personalities got in the way. He got lightning in a bottle again on Die Hard. And you want to talk lightning in a bottle? Number one, if there is anybody that is listening to the show right now that has never seen Die Hard, I want to know what rock you live under. Because, everybody's seen Die Hard. It is a major, major, major Bruce Willis vehicle, and it did launch him into the stratosphere in what he does later in life. The thing that I like about Bruce Willis is when you see him on screen, no matter what character he is playing, you kind of think Willis is that guy you can hang out with. That he would be fun, he would be cool. When in reality, Ziggy is right. The vast majority of the rumors in Hollywood out there is that he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, he's kind of a dick.
And those rumors tend to kind of be a little accurate because you get multiple people. Conversely, let's talk about somebody else who is a mega star, who everybody says is the nicest person you'll ever want to meet, and that's Keanu Reeves.
Oh, yeah.
And so I kind of take a little bit of stock in that, because it's not just TMZ saying Bruce Willis is a jerk and Keanu Reeves is wonderful.
It's people he works with, and you can also listen to the way they say things. If they say things about someone and it's political, it's oh, he's a Jim. They say certain phrases. That means that person's a dick.
Yeah.
It means that person's kind of difficult to work with.
Yeah.
When they talk about Keanu Reeves, that's not what they say.
Right.
They actually say, "I love this guy. He's just the coolest guy I ever met."
Yeah. And there's another actor out there that a lot of people think is a really cool guy and a great guy to work and a great guy to be around, but is also very difficult on a set because he's very demanding, is Harrison Ford.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says he's nice and he's great to work with, but he's extremely demanding on set.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that.
Yeah.
I think that comes out in his personality. But anyway, boy, we got all philosophical on this one.
Well, we kind of needed to for The Last Boy Scout. I love this film, but yeah, Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans are the problem in this film.
Yeah.
I think less so Damon Wayans and more so Bruce Willis.
Agreed.
Because Damon Wayans hadn't really done. He'd worked with his brother a lot, you know. And it feels like there are times when Damon Wayans is fighting for the scenes, and
yes,
Taylor Negron, who is one of the bad guys, Milo, is just, you can see how that motherfucker's coming in. He's earning his stripes, and he's just kind of navigating his way through. He's great. He's just great. But he's so fucking creepy when he talks. That's why people hired him. It's like, because when he talks, he's just got this weird kind of voice, and it's up and down, and it's a little softer than it should be, but also a little harder than it should be. He makes a great bad guy or a great creepy guy. Creepy mailman. But yeah, so the whole cast, other than the two main characters, are exceptional in this film. Everybody else is pulling aces, straights, and flushes. And the little kid, she's like 12, and she cusses like a sailor. I loved that kid. You see that character come back a lot in action films later. The daughter who just, is kind of an asshole to her dad because her dad is an asshole. But yeah, you get a lot of craziness going on. I would recommend seeing it, but just, with a grain of salt. Bruce Willis, the character itself is interesting, but while you're watching it, imagine somebody good. Again, I don't want to necessarily say good because, again, Bruce Willis is good at what he does. Imagine somebody else in that role. That movie makes a hell of a lot more sense. I'd like to see it remade. I'd like to see it remade, set in the early 90s, like this one was set. I think that would be fun. The last film on our list is from 2016. It is The Nice Guys. It is a neo-noir black comedy film directed by Shane Black, and who co-wrote the screenplay with Anthony Bagarozzi, just like the last film. The film stars Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling, with Angourie Rice, Matt Bomer, Margaret Qualley, Keith David, and Kim Basinger appearing in supporting roles. Set in 1977 Los Angeles, the film focuses on Private Eye Holland March, played by Ryan Gosling, and tough enforcer for hire Jackson Healy, played by Russell Crowe. So again, they're both private investigators. They team up to investigate the disappearance of a teenage girl, Margaret Qualley. The Nice Guys premiered on May 11th, 2016 in Hollywood, screened on May 15th at the 2016 Cannes Film Festival, and was released by Warner Brothers Pictures on May 20th of 2016. It received positive reviews from critics for its humor, mystery, and the performances of Crowe and Gosling, but it flopped at the box office as it grossed $63 million on a $50 million budget. So it basically broke even. Since its release, the film gained a cult following, especially for Gosling and Crowe's chemistry and comedy. It's 1977, Los Angeles. Holland March is a private eye hired by Mrs. Glenn to find her niece, porn star Misty Mountains, who she claims to have seen after her death. March's investigation leads him to Amelia Kuttner. Fearful Amelia pays Jackson Healy, a violent enforcer, to scare March away. After visiting March at his home and breaking his arm, he accepts a yoo-hoo from March's teenage daughter, Holly, and as he leaves, when Healy returns home with a case full of yoo-hoo, he is interrogated by two thugs. Blueface, so named after he sets off a dye pack while searching Healy's apartment, an older guy about Amelia. Believing Amelia is in danger, Healy wards them off and teams up with a reluctant March to find her. Much like Black's previously directed film Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys takes inspiration from Brad Halliday, namely his novel Blue Murder. Black initially wrote a version of the script along with Anthony Bagarozzi in 2001 while establishing the characters, but otherwise was vastly different. According to Black, each would start with one detective. He was March and Bagarozzi was Healy. Along the way, they swapped characters and eventually wrote a first draft. The version of the script failed to attract any buyers, and then Black reworked it into a 64-page version that would serve as a television pilot for CBS. But there were objections by standards and practices, so he called his producer friend Joe Silver. Again, they've had some trouble with Joe Silver on The Last Boy Scout in 1991, but this is, quite a few years later, 25 years later, who told them that they should do it as a period piece. Because Sherlock Holmes had been real big when this was coming on. But it was like, we need to look at Vanishing Point and Five Easy Pieces. Two really great, super gritty 1970s cop dramas. And it needs to be ironic and non-descriptive, as the two main characters were literally the two worst people they could think of. So we need to try to make it fun and those two guys funny. And when they did that, they stumbled on the idea of this film, and they got the two best guys who could do it. And you can tell that everybody is having fun living in the 70s in this film. Like the smoking, the fucking suits, the big TVs, and the radios, and the disco dancing and everything. Everybody is having a fucking blast making this film, which again kind of shows that the problems with the previous film 25 years earlier were because of a couple of people. I think everybody else in this fucking film was on board.
I'm gonna break out of this for 1 minute because I have to say this because you just said something. Those of us that grew up in the 70s in the South are probably the only ones that know this, but this was very common for people who grew up in the South. Is you had, because you talked about big TVs, is you had someone in your family who had a working TV that sat on top of a non-working TV.
Well, because the old TV, the non-working TV, was a piece of furniture as well as the TV.
Yes, sorry.
In the 80s, a lot of those people gutted those things out and turned them into drinks cabinets because they were fucking huge and they had doors on them.
Yeah, it's just funny. That was a Southern thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because if you put it on top, it was the perfect height.
Yeah.
Because
they had these
spent the
TVs
70s sitting low because the TV was a fucking console.
Right. They had these TVs that sat in the middle of what in today's world would be a cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the TV in the middle and speakers on the side and a flat wooden top. Mm-hmm. And it would eventually burn out. And so you would put a new working TV on top of that.
Of it. and it was like, you were watching it like, man, this is way better than looking down.
Yeah.
Oh, he's right. It happened.
But yeah, I mean, this movie, it captured the 70s very well, especially in both humor and style. Mm-hmm. The comedy.
It's evocative of Freebie and the Bean, which is great. Which is another reason why I love having these two in the list.
Well, and the comedy in this movie is really smart. And the funny thing is, having Gosling and Crowe in this, you wouldn't expect this. It's smart, but it's still slapstick when it wants to be.
Oh yeah. You know what? It's like Crowe and Gosling were so happy to not have to play the pretty boy.
Yeah.
That they jumped all the fuck over this.
You could have given me 1,000 chances to guess who would be perfect in these two roles, and Gosling and Crowe wouldn't have ever crossed my lips.
Yeah. You would have, who you would have picked, depending on the year? You would have picked up Bruce Willis type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, so having said that, take Russell Crowe from this film and put him in The Last Boy Scout.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
That movie would be so much better.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. I, I love this film. Again, I may actually, when we're done recording this episode, may sit down and watch this movie again. This and Freebie and the Bean. um, yeah, I love this picture. And it's a picture. It's it's an old fashioned film. It smells like the 70s. Everybody smokes. Everybody's drinking and like drinking in the first thing in the morning. Or, their idea of healthy is a yoo-hoo.
Yeah, those of you in our listening audience that are older and didn't experience the 70s the way we did, drinking in the movies and on TV was not just a small thing. It was commonplace. Perfect example, the match game.
Uh-huh.
They were all sitting there with their cocktails right in front of them throughout every episode. Throughout every episode. And you can tell as the episode went on, they're all getting a little bit inebriated.
Yeah. Some of them got hammered.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that was just
Charles Nelson Riley would get
oh my gosh, yes.
hammered.
Yes. But that was the culture in the 70s. That's just how it was. And this movie really, for being a movie from 2016, this movie really adapts to that culture very well and portrays that culture very well. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, it really portrays it very well.
A physical copy of this movie, swear to God, smells like polyester cigarettes and Pierre Cardin. Yeah. So that is it for the 4 buddy cop movies, other than you guys need to get out there and check them out. I have put in little scenes from each one, so to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. But the scenes I put in are little quick character studies more than anything else. Just to kind of show you how they bounced off each other. Or in the case of Last Boy Scout, didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's pretty awesome stuff, and I wanted to get some Mateo Negron in there too because I thought he was the most interesting character in that film, Milo.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Good stuff. I appreciate that. With that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off AP News, Justia.com, Murderpedia, and the Crime Library archives, and this is the story of Daniel Lee Siebert.
Daniel Lee Siebert.
So several weeks ago, I actually go way back beyond that. I had talked for a long time. I don't remember if I mentioned it on the show or if Zig and I just talked about this separately outside the show. But I talked for a long time about how I wanted to do an A to Z of serial killers across the country. And then a few weeks ago, we had the interview with Johnny Trevisani, who wrote his book, that he went across America doing the A to Z. So I knew I wanted to take this journey on my own. I'm not trying to step on Johnny's toes when I do this. This is my own take. I try to make sure that I'm not doing ones that he's done. And there are some I have to find a little bit different because I've covered them before. But this one is Daniel Lee Siebert. Let me set up the initial scene on this one. So you got an apartment, very quiet when the police entered it, and it was too quiet. It's that kind of quiet that feels staged, like somebody had very carefully removed all the noise, only left an echo of what had happened. Officers stepped through a doorway with very slow, deliberate movements. They knew this was not going to be a standard welfare check. There was a missing student, a locked door, and a very strange silence. When they flicked the lights on, the scene told its story immediately. A University of Alabama student, 24-year-old Sherry Weathers, lay motionless. Her 2 young children were nearby, and one look was all it took for responding officers to understand that no accident, no natural death, and no random tragedy. This was intentional, methodical, and cold. Whoever did this had done it calmly. The apartment itself showed almost no signs of struggle, no smashed lamps, no overturned furniture. Instead, the space felt very controlled, quiet, and almost ritualistic in its stillness. The officers could feel it even before the detectives arrived. This was the work of someone who didn't panic, didn't lose control, and didn't act impulsively. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing and someone who had done it before. Word of this spread fast through the department. A young mother and her kids murdered in what seemed like a precise, calculated fashion. Within hours, investigators would learn that a friend of Sherry's had also disappeared. Within days, another body would be found, and the picture was forming, and it was beginning to be a dark one. There was the killer was already gone, but not invisible. He had a pattern. He left echoes of himself behind. Soon, detectives would connect the dots of a man who drifted across the country for years, teaching martial arts, taking odd jobs, using fake names, and blending in with the forgettable edges of the cities he passed through. His birth name was Daniel Lee Siebert. But by the time investigators caught up with him, he had used so many aliases that even he struggled to remember them all. Siebert was not famous like Bundy or Gacy. He wasn't theatrical. He didn't dress as a clown or escape from courthouses or taunt police with cryptic letters. He simply moved from place to place, killing quietly, killing cleanly, and leaving behind bodies and broken families without ever making a sound. And that silence is what makes his story so terrifying, because Siebert wasn't hunting attention. He was just hunting. As the investigation grew, detectives realized this was not just an Alabama case. It stretched into California, Nevada, and several other states. There were unconfirmed victims, suspected victims, and victims too damaged to be conclusively linked. Siebert slipped through towns like smoke, leaving devastation behind, but rarely leaving enough evidence to catch him. But in the end, it wasn't a witness that brought him down. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even a dramatic standoff. It was his past that finally caught up to him after more than a decade of drifting, hiding, and becoming whatever people needed him to be. So this is the story of Daniel Lee Siebert, a man who blended in so well that no one noticed the danger until it was standing right behind them.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so when we get to the end of the story, you're going to understand why his quiet violence really still echoes through Alabama's history and why we're starting our state-to-state journey right here. Serial killers themselves tend to live in the big shadows of big cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, places where anonymity is a given and crowds make the perfect cover. But the truth is, serial killers can come from anywhere: small towns, quiet communities, college cities, rural pockets of the American South, and everywhere knows where everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows everyone else until they don't. So here in 2016, I'm going to begin our new series, an A to Z journey through American serial killers state by state. And we are going to start with Alabama. This is a state better known for football rivalry, Southern cooking, and musical heritage more than it is serial murder. But Alabama has its monsters too, and few were as quietly dangerous as Daniel Lee Siebert. Siebert didn't want headlines. He didn't chase the spotlight. He didn't taunt police or send coded letters to newspapers. He just drifted. As I said earlier, he taught martial arts. He took odd jobs. He charmed people. He manipulated them. And then when the time suited him, he killed them with a level of calm that investigators still talk about. His crimes were not confined to one place either. They stretched across multiple states. As I'd said, Nevada, California, Alabama, and possibly beyond. Some victims were confirmed. Others remain highly suspected. A few will probably never be identified at all. Siebert left a trail of devastation behind him, but not enough evidence for law enforcement to connect things quickly, and that's part of what makes this case so chilling. Because Siebert, he blended in. He slipped through life, rolling through back alleys and that were easy to miss until you were in them. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a guy you might work with, or the friendly instructor at your local dojo, or the man who rented a room down the hall. That's what made him effective, and that's what made him deadly. It was in Alabama where his crimes hit the hardest, where the young mother was killed, her two children. It was a friend. Another victim shortly after that, and a string of murders that shook the University of Alabama community and left police scrambling to figure out who could have done something so cold, so calculated, and so precise. His brutality wasn't chaotic. It wasn't impulsive. It was very intentional. And as investigators dug deeper, they realized this was not a first-time killer. This wasn't some local domestic case gone wrong. This was someone who had done this before, and someone that's with experience, someone who had killed in other places and under other names. So today we're going to walk through Siebert's past, his crimes, his psychology, and the manhunt that pulled in multiple states, and the eventual trial that finally brought his drifting violence to an end. We'll look at the lives he impacted, the family he's destroyed, and the long shadow he cast over Alabama's criminal history. Because even though he didn't become a household name, his quiet, calculated brutality places him among one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history. As we go in here from time to time, Zig may jump in there wherever there needs to be a comparison, a timeline check, or a historical callback, because this is a long, dark road, and so might as well take it together.
I was looking at pictures of the dude. I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have picked that motherfucker out of a crowd.
Yeah. So with that, let's step back to the beginning, before the aliases, before the murders, and before the manhunt, before Alabama became the centerpiece of this multi-state nightmare. Let's talk about where Daniel Lee Siebert came from and how he became the kind of killer you never see coming. When investigators finally began piecing together the movements of Siebert, one thing became very clear very quickly. This was not someone who suddenly snapped in adulthood. This was not a man who woke up one day, committed a murder, and then continued on as if nothing happened. His path to violence had been forming long before his first known killing. It was shaped by instability, unpredictability, and deep-rooted disconnect from the people around him. He was born on June 17th, 1954 in Mattoon, Illinois. He came into the world very quietly. There was no dramatic circumstances that sometimes marked the early lives of serial offenders. There was no headline tragedy, no catastrophic major event, but what followed in his childhood was really his slow erosion of stability. Reports who knew of him as a boy described him as a child who floated through life rather than participated in it. He was present physically, but emotionally detached, and he learned early how to blend in. By his teenage years, this type of emotional distance had become noticeable. He struggled with authority and had difficulty forming real connections. He showed early signs of behavioral problems, including minor delinquency and frequent clashes with adults. Nothing so dramatic as to predict murder, but enough to mark him as a young man struggling to find stability or purpose. At some point in his adolescence, the drifting began. He left home, sometimes returning. Sometimes he'd vanish for weeks. He bounced between jobs, schools, and cities, and this pattern would become the defining rhythm of his adult life. Appear, blend in, move on. Appear, blend in, move on. The cycle that never stopped until the day he was arrested decades later.
They said he started this in adolescence, so I'm thinking 13, 14.
Yeah.
So that would put him like 75, 76, 77. A lot of hitchhiking going on at that period too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because he was born in 53, 73 would have been 10, 76 he would have been 13. 76.
Yeah, my dad did that. He hitchhiked home when he was on leave for the military.
Yeah, 76 to like 1980. Yeah, that shit was going on a lot.
It was common, but it was also the stage for a lot of murders and kidnappings.
Yes, it was.
The people trusted people and became easy prey. By the early 70s, Siebert had already started getting a criminal record, burglary, theft, and assault. More than once, he attacked or attempted to attack women, which was an early indication of the violence that would later escalate into murder. None of these crimes connected him to who he would become, but each one was a step further into the dark. His drifting lifestyle made it difficult for anyone to keep tabs on him. He lived in multiple states, sometimes staying only days or weeks before moving on. He'd take on work as a laborer, a cook, a martial arts instructor, or anything he could find. He charmed people very easily, which is something that would later horrify those who realized they had trusted a serial killer, even without seeing the danger. In 1979, long before he stepped foot in Alabama, Siebert committed his first known murder. The victim was a woman in Las Vegas. Her death was brutal, and her body was found in a manner that suggested familiarity with violence. He was charged, but like so many drifters of the era, Siebert vanished before he could be brought to trial. During the early 80s, he continued to drift between states, living under names like Daniel Spence and Daniel Stevens. He perfected the art of becoming forgettable. He'd enter cities through a side door and leave through the back. He left behind acquaintances who remembered him as nice or quiet or helpful, never realizing that the stranger they had welcomed into their lives had already killed at least one. By the time he surfaced in Alabama in the mid-1980s, Siebert was not just a drifter. He was a predator who was honing his methods. He learned how to kill without leaving chaos behind, and he learned how to charm without revealing emotion, and he learned how to disappear when everything's got risky. Before Alabama, he was dangerous, but Alabama is where he became unforgettable. When he arrived in Alabama in the mid-1980s, nothing about him stood out. He blended into the background with the same unsettling talent he had perfected over years drifting across the country. He found odd jobs. He made acquaintances who would later remember him as polite or quiet. And he moved through the University of Alabama community like smoke, present but never lingering long enough for anyone to truly know him. Among the people he met during this period was 24-year-old Sherry Weathers, who was a student and young mother working tirelessly to build a better life for herself and her two children. To those who knew her, Sherry was kind, resilient, and determined. She was juggling classes, parenthood, and financial challenges. But with it all, she carried with it warmth and strength. Siebert saw something else, a vulnerability he could exploit. Accounts of their connection vary. Some say they met through campus circles, others through mutual acquaintances or casual gatherings. Regardless of how they crossed paths, though, Siebert inserted himself easily into her life. And that was his greatest weapon, not brute force, but invisibility. He seemed helpful, trustworthy, and even gentle. He was a man who offered to lend a hand, who smiled slowly, or who blended in with the scenery of everyday life. No one expected the kind of man who could be dangerous. Police were first called to Sherry's apartment for a standard welfare check. She hadn't been seen in several days. Professors noticed her absence, and friends were worried. And then when officers stepped inside, as we talked about at the beginning, that stillness was very immediate and suffocating. Something was very wrong. Then they turned on the lights and saw the horror that was inside. Sherry had been murdered. Her two small children lay nearby. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no chaotic aftermath. The crime scene itself was disturbingly clean and disturbingly calm. Whoever killed them had done so with practiced control, and they moved through the apartment with very silent confidence. It wasn't a brutal, frenzied attack. It was efficient. Detectives immediately began piecing together Sherry's last known movements, the last people to see her, and the threads of her life before she just vanished. Siebert's name surfaced early. He had been seen near her apartment, and he had spoken with her shortly before she disappeared. But then almost as quickly as the murders occurred, he was gone. But this didn't end with Sherry and her children. One of Sherry's close friends, someone who had grown concerned enough to check on her, also disappeared. Days later, her body was found, and she too had been murdered.
University of Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
So it was placed around Tuscaloosa.
Correct.
About 1986-ish?
It was in the 80s.
Okay.
Yep.
85, 86? Okay.
So, for police, this was no longer a domestic tragedy or situational crime. This was a cluster and a pattern. They had a predator on their hand. On the University of Alabama campus, they were just shaken to the core. Students were terrified and parents were panicked. Faculty was demanding answers. They had a mother, two children, and a friend murdered in rapid succession, and that this wasn't random. It wasn't impulsive. This was the work of someone who had done it before. Investigators widened their focus, and at that point, Siebert's past began to surface. They learned he had used multiple aliases that we had talked about, drifting from one identity to the next. They learned of a murder in Vegas, another in California, possible victims in other states. He had been slipping through the cracks for years, but Alabama was different. Alabama hit hard because these victims were so vulnerable. Again, a young mother, children, a woman who simply cared enough to check on her friend. These were not confrontational killings. They were executions of opportunity. They were targets chosen because they trusted Siebert, or because they would not fight back, or because they'd stumbled into his orbit at the wrong moment. The precision of the murders disturbed investigators. The lack of struggle suggested that Siebert had controlled the situation effortlessly, possibly gaining entry through familiarity or deception. He didn't panic, he didn't rush, and he destroyed multiple lives with the calm efficiency of someone who had long since stopped seeing people as human beings. In the community, grief turned to fear, and fear turned into anger. Parents pulled their children from campus housing. Students traveled in groups. The idea began to spread that a serial killer had been living among them, drinking coffee in their restaurants, blending in their daily life, and it was really almost too much to process. And this was the moment when Siebert transformed from a drifter with a violent past into a fully recognized serial killer. Alabama connected the dots, and publicly, loudly, and unmistakably. Yes.
Talladega. It was a part of the University of Alabama, but it was in Talladega.
Ah, okay.
So actually smaller than Tuscaloosa.
Makes sense. I don't think that was pointed out here.
Yeah,
I
okay.
just had
Sorry, I was like, okay,
no, not a problem. I just always had University of Alabama in all the things I read.
Apparently, they've got campuses all over the state.
Just like University of Texas,
That's
they've got
true.
campuses all over the state.
Yeah, and A&M too. A&M's got a bunch of campuses.
Absolutely. There's a UT down here. It's UTRGV. So, So the murders in Alabama were not his first, but they would become the crimes that defined him. They were the ones that forced law enforcement across multiple states to collaborate and trace his aliases that unraveled his drifting path. They were the murders that finally placed Siebert as the center of a nationwide manhunt. But Alabama was not where the violence began. It's just where it could no longer be ignored. Alabama, it holds the most infamous chapter of his crimes. It was far from the beginning and not even close to the full scope. Siebert had been honing his violence across multiple states long before he stepped onto campus. His life was a trail of half-finished jobs, abandoned identities, suspicious disappearances, and unexplained deaths. When investigators finally started pulling the threads together, they realized Alabama was just one point on a long, dark map. The first known murder was in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1979. This is the earliest confirmed victim linked to Siebert. Her name is not always included in public records due to the nature of the assault, but what is known is she was found murdered at a manner that suggests the killer was familiar with violence and comfortable with it. The body showed signs of overkill, but not friendly. There was control, purpose, and a chilling level of calm. Again, Siebert was charged with this murder because police had enough evidence to bring him in, but before he could reach trial, he disappeared. And this would become his pattern: commit murder, charm or deceive the people around him, change names, and vanish before the consequences arrived. He was a ghost long before law enforcement realized it. Next, in California, 1985, a woman in California was murdered under circumstances disturbingly similar to the Las Vegas case. Her name was Linda Jarman. She was a 22-year-old student, and she was found strangled. Her body was posed in a manner suggested the killer wanted control even in death. At the time, no connection was made to the Las Vegas murder, nor to the man calling himself Daniel Spence. But witnesses would later remember he was charming, he was quiet, he moved easily through social groups, and he had a strange ability to blend into any environment. By the time Linda's murder began to be investigated in earnest, Daniel Spence was already halfway across the country, and it wasn't until Siebert's arrest years later that California authorities connected the dots. This next one is unconfirmed, but is a strongly suspected victim. While investigators were retracing Siebert's movement, they discovered a troubling pattern. Wherever he lived, even briefly, there were cases of missing women, unexplained deaths, or violent attacks that matched his method of operation. States with potential victims include Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Some cases involve strangulation, which was Siebert's preferred method. Other involved victims who had known him personally, often through martial arts classes, workplaces, or casual social circles. A few victims were transient women living on society's margins, the kind of victims predators target because they believe no one will come looking for them. Authorities estimate Siebert may have killed between 10 and 20 victims, although only a fraction were ever confirmed. Siebert himself offered conflicting statements, sometimes bragging, sometimes denying, sometimes blaming others. He wanted to control the narrative, even sitting in the jail cell. His ability to evade justice came down to a perfect storm of factors that in the area before digital made serial killers incredibly difficult to track. Number one, multiple aliases. We talked about Spence and Stevens, but he was also Danny Starr, Dan Rivers, Timothy Brent Sherrill. And each alias came with a slightly different backstory, job, and lifestyle. Employers rarely checked identification through the 70s and 80s, and background checks were primitive at best. I can attest to that because I got a job at Kroger. Sorry, Kroger, if you ever want to sponsor us, but I conned you. I got a job at Kroger at 14 years old. I walked in, I said I was 16. That's what I wrote on my paper, and I got a job. No background, no check, no nothing.
Nothing. Close enough.
And that's just how it was. That's how it was in the pre-digital age. The second thing was his drifter's lifestyle. He never stayed anywhere long. few months here, a few weeks there, and by the time police interviewed witnesses in one state, Siebert was gone long before the ink even dried on their notes. He had that charming and disarming behavior. Dozens of people later told investigators some version of, he was nice, he seemed gentle, he never raised his voice, I never would have guessed he was dangerous. Serial killers very often weaponize charisma, and Siebert used this like a professional surgeon. The targets were people who trusted him. Most of the women Siebert killed knew him. They invited him in voluntarily. They spoke to him. They allowed him into their routines, and that made his crimes clean, controlled, and low risk. Jurisdictional silos. Before the 1990s, police departments often did not communicate across state lines unless they had a direct reason. A murder in Nevada had no obvious connection to a murder in California unless someone spotted the pattern. Siebert knew this, and he exploited it.
Shit, sometimes cities in the same county didn't share information.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We talked about that in North Fox Island. We had police departments in various areas of the city that were not talking to each other.
Yeah. Again, they're in the same fucking county. You would think that at least those guys, nope.
Yeah, no.
And they sure as hell are not going to share stuff between Las Vegas and Talladega, Alabama.
No.
It's just not going to happen.
No. The trail that led to Alabama, by the mid-1980s, Siebert had left behind a trail of bodies, missing person reports, and suspicious encounters across multiple states. But because he constantly changed names, and because local police departments lacked the modern tools to cross-reference suspects, no one connected him to the larger pattern. That changed only after the Alabama murders. Once investigators saw the brutality and precisions of the killings, here we go, in Tuscaloosa, there we go, I did have it written in here. They learned that a man named Daniel Spence had suddenly vanished, and the manhunt began. Once they realized Spence was an alias and that the man underneath the mask was connected to crimes in multiple states, this exploded into a nationwide effort. Nevada reopened files. California re-examined old case notes. Other states began matching details from unsolved murders to Siebert's movement. And so at this point, the quiet drifter had finally become visible. And this was the visibility that would kick off one of the most intense multi-state manhunts of the late 1980s. By the time Alabama authorities realized they were dealing with a multi-state killer, Siebert was already gone. His absence wasn't surprising. Disappearing is what he did best. But by this time, investigators were armed with something they never had before, a name that wasn't an alias, a real identity. And with that, for the first time, the manhunt had a chance. The investigation took its first major leap forward when detectives traced the name Daniel Spence, a man who had been working as a martial arts instructor and handyman in the Tuscaloosa area. When Siebert vanished after the murders, investigators grew suspicious. They ran the name and nothing. They ran fingerprints left on file from prior employment for him. This time something hit. Spence wasn't Spence at all. He was Daniel Lee Siebert, who was a fugitive with a long history of assault, burglary, and suspicious disappearances. His record stretched back to Illinois, Nevada, California, and beyond, multiple mugshots, multiple fingerprints, but no consistent trail. So now they had a real face, and now they had a real name.
I bet he looked different in that, because I've seen a couple of looking up pictures of him. That dude could change his face by changing his facial hair and haircut.
Yeah, I think he was kind of a chameleon. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, like nothing. All he's doing is changing his hair and his facial hair. It looks like a different dude. Because I was looking at 3 or 4 pictures, I was like, oh shit, that's the same dude, but you can't.
Well, his drifting lifestyle made it difficult. He would wear Florida beaches, Midwestern truck stops, West Coast cities, rural Southern towns. He never stayed long, never established deep ties, and was able to reinvent himself overnight. Law enforcement knew they were chasing a man who spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of vanishing. So police across multiple states finally began sharing information: murder reports, missing person cases, employment logs, martial arts studio rosters, transient arrest records. And slowly the picture sharpened. Siebert had passed through Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Reno, Little Rock, New Orleans, Houston, Nashville, half a dozen small towns, but he was always just ahead of the law. Throughout 1986, sightings started trickling in. In Birmingham, Alabama, a man matching Siebert's description was seen at a bus station. By the time police arrived, he was gone. Dallas, Texas, a martial arts instructor reported that a man calling himself Dan Rivers had worked at his gym briefly before disappearing. Shreveport, Louisiana.
Smart, too. If you notice, all of his aliases, he has the same first name.
Yes. Yes.
Because he doesn't have to worry about not answering to that.
Exactly, because that's a key tell right there. Is it's basic human nature to react when your first name is called, and if you don't have it ingrained in your head what your fake first name is, you can very easily ignore someone talking directly to you.
Mm-hmm.
Shreveport, Louisiana, there was a woman who claimed she had gone on a date with a quiet, polite man who fit Siebert's description exactly. She later recalled there was something off in his eyes. He vanished the next day. Tampa, Florida, a bartender recognized him from a newspaper photo, but by the time officers swept the area, the trail was cold again. The hunt grew more intense. The FBI became involved, distributing bulletins, competent sketches, and a list of aliases Siebert had used over the years. But every confirmed sighting seemed to come only after he had already moved on. In early 1987, the break investigators desperately needed came from Florida. A former coworker of Siebert's recognized him from a broadcast and reported he might be staying at a homeless shelter in St. Petersburg. Police and federal agents converged on the area, but once again, he had slipped away. But then a tip came that shifted everything. A woman who had briefly dated Siebert remembered that he sometimes talked about heading towards the coast and especially mentioned Tennessee as a place he liked because nobody pays attention there. It wasn't much, but it narrowed the search. So authorities sent
I'll be safe there.
So authorities sent out bulletins across Tennessee with new urgency. And on February 19th, 1987, Siebert was finally tracked down in Zebulon Pike, Tennessee, staying in a small house with another drifter who had no idea who Siebert really was. So his arrest was very shockingly anticlimactic. When officers approached, Siebert didn't run, he didn't fight, he didn't even speak at first. He simply raised his hand. Officers later said he looked almost relieved, as if the running had finally exhausted him. Inside the home, investigators found forged IDs, handwritten notes listing his own aliases, newspaper clippings about the Alabama murders, and clothing linked to one of the victims. The evidence tied him directly to the crimes. He was transported back to Alabama to face trial. Once in custody, he displayed about the same calm he had during his crimes. He talked freely about drifting, using aliases, about surviving an odd job. He showed no fear of prison, no remorse for the victims, and no emotional reaction when discussing the murders. A forensic psychologist who evaluated him said he was one of the most affectless individuals I've ever met. No guilt, no empathy, no anxiety. He viewed people as objects, tools, nothing more. Even in interrogation, Siebert controlled the pace of the conversation. He withheld details when he wanted power. He released information when he wanted attention. And he gave contradictory statements to confused investigators. At various points, he claimed he had only killed 5 people. He had killed 12. He had killed as many as 20. He liked playing around with the numbers. The University of Alabama erupted in both relief and anger. Students and parents expressed gratitude for his capture, but many asked how someone with such a violent past had slipped through so many cracks. Families of the victims attended court hearings silently, some glaring at Siebert as he was escorted by deputies, and he never looked back. The media covered the story heavily, labeling him the drifter killer and the quiet predator, but Siebert himself refused to give interviews, refused to apologize, and refused to acknowledge the impact of his actions. Simply waited for trial. Because for Siebert, the chase was finally over. Now it was time to face judgment. When he was finally brought back to Alabama, prosecutors moved quickly. They had multiple victims, strong forensic links, eyewitnesses accounts, and a mountain of circumstantial evidence that pointed to Siebert as a calculating and experienced killer. But even with the weight of the case against him, no one could have predicted just how cold and detached Siebert would be through the legal process. He was formally charged with the murder of Sherry Weathers, her 2 young children, and her friend Linda Jarman, and in a related California case that was later connected to him, another University of Alabama student whose murder mirrored the same method of operation. And so Alabama prosecutors began with the strongest case, the murder of Sherry Weathers, knowing that even one conviction would be enough to secure a death sentence. But they also made it clear they intended to try him for every murder they could tie to him. From the moment he entered the courtroom, Siebert displayed the same eerie calm he had shown during interrogation. He did not look at the victims' families. He did not react to emotional testimony. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice was flat, almost bored. Reporters described him as expressionless, cold as stone, and completely unaffected. One journalist wrote, watching Siebert in court was like watching someone sit through a lecture they had already heard. He seemed uninterested and almost annoyed that he was required to be present. For the families of the victims, his lack of emotion only deepened their anger and grief. Alabama prosecutors were very methodical. They laid out forensics evidence linking him to the crime scene, witnesses who placed him with Sherry shortly before her murder, documents showing the aliases and movements, his sudden disappearance after the killings, and prior violent offenses that helped establish intent and pattern. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from handwritten notes found at the Tennessee residence where he'd been arrested, listing the aliases, dates, and cryptic entries that aligned disturbingly well with known murders. The prosecution emphasized control. They painted Siebert as a man who had snapped, not as a man who had snapped, but as a predator who executed his crimes with precision, a man who killed without panic, without chaos, and without remorse. Siebert's defense team had very little to work with, so they focused on challenging the forensic timeline, arguing that evidence was circumstantial and claiming that the state was unfairly connecting him to unrelated murders. They attempted to portray Siebert as a misunderstood drifter, not a serial killer, but the evidence was overwhelming and the jury wasn't buying it. At one point, Siebert did himself attempt to interject, telling the judge, quote, "I'm not the monster they're describing." He said it in a very flat tone, which only made it worse. One juror later said, quote, "It didn't sound like a denial. It sounded like someone commenting on the weather."
I'm not the monster they think I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. When the sentence was read, he showed no reaction, none at all. He simply stared ahead, blinking occasionally as if the entire proceeding had nothing to do with him. For the families of the victims, it was a small measure of justice, but it was far from closure. After his conviction, Siebert faced potential charges in California, Nevada, and Florida. However, most states ultimately chose not to pursue charges because Alabama already had a death sentence secured. Witnesses and physical evidence had degraded over time, and Siebert's declining health complicated additional trial. Investigators still, though, remained open, and Siebert was formally identified as the prime suspect in several unsolved homicides. Throughout the legal proceedings, Siebert alternated between claiming innocence, admitting to several murders, hinting at many more, and refusing to discuss specifics. He told one investigator he had killed around 12, later insisted he had only killed 5, and then later denied all involvement. He kept shifting the narrative and appeared designed to maintain control, to keep investigators and the public guessing. A forensics psychologist described it perfectly, saying, quote, "He treated murder like a game of numbers he alone was allowed to play." He did file a series of appeals after conviction. None were successful, and his time on death row was marked by quiet behavior, minimal interaction with other inmates, strong stretches of silence, no visible remorse. He spent most of his days reading, writing letters, and occasionally granting brief interviews where he alternated between denial and morbid boasting. In the early 2000s, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which was an aggressive illness that advanced quickly. At one point, his attorneys argued that executing him would be cruel and unusual, given his medical condition. Victims' families responded with outrage. One family member said he showed no mercy to his victims. He doesn't get to ask for any now. Alabama postponed his execution temporarily due to his declining health, but they did not overturn his sentence. On April 22nd, 2008, Daniel Lee Siebert died in the Holman Correctional Facility on Alabama's death row, and not by execution, but from complications from the cancer. He died quietly, he died without confession, and he died without remorse. And for a lot of families, it was stolen justice. They waited decades to see him face execution, only for illness to take him instead.
Yeah,
I have
pancreatic
to say
cancer is not nice.
No, it's not. He probably died in an exceptional amount of pain.
Yeah.
Prosecutors later said he took control in life, and in a way, he took control in death, too. Who knows on that? To this day, investigators do believe that Siebert's true number of victims may never be known. Like many drifters of his area, he moved through gaps in the system, which allowed him to kill for nearly a decade without detection. Alabama is where the silence broke, and the trial ensured he would never walk free again. As we look back on Siebert, what we're reminded of is something deeply unsettling. Sometimes the most deranged monsters and dangerous monsters are ones who blend in. We've talked about some of those before. There were no grand theatrics for Siebert, no taunting letters, no bold public persona. He was not a headline hunter. He was a spectacle. He was a shadow. He was a quiet, drifting presence who slipped in and out of lives without leaving a trace until it was far too late.
Yeah,
What makes
it sounds like most people didn't even actually know his real name.
right. And what
Like
makes
nobody who knew him knew his real name.
yeah. And what makes his case so terrifying isn't just the violence he inflicted, it's just how easily he moved through the world without raising suspicion. He was not the stereotypical type of killer. He was not loud or erratic. He didn't rant. He didn't rage. He smiled. He helped people. He taught martial arts. He paid his rent on time. He lived in small apartments and he ate in cheap diners and talked to neighbors in the casual way strangers knew. Behind all that, he was killing.
Mm-hmm.
His victims were not random. They were people who knew him, trusted him. They let him into their homes and their routine. And he used this kindness as a weapon. He used softness as a disguise. He used familiarity as an entry point. Because of this, he left behind victims who never saw the danger coming, not even the last moments of their lives.
He probably knew in advance who he was going to murder. I bet
Oh,
he
I'm
picked
sure
these
he did.
people out.
I'm
was
sure
like,
he absolutely did. I'm sure he absolutely did. After he got to know him and got to working on them, they were his target.
Mm-hmm.
The University of Alabama murders shocked the state for a reason. They were not just brutal, but they shattered the illusion of safety in a place where people are supposed to feel secure. We've had other episodes where we've talked about that. College communities where a murder happened, because college communities are built on trust.
Mm-hmm.
Students trust classmates, professors trust students, and families trust their loved ones will come home at night. Siebert violated all of this, and his crimes left a scar that still lingers decades later. The multi-state nature of his violence also exposed the cracks in the American criminal justice system that let people like Siebert slip through, because this was before modern databases, before instant background checks, before digital fingerprints could be shared across jurisdictions. This was a man with a handful of aliases that could disappear the moment he crossed the state line, and that's exactly what he did for years. Nevada, California, Alabama, Tennessee, and possibly several other states with victims whose names we may never know. In the modern world of law enforcement, with interstate communication, national registries, and real-time data, Siebert's drifting anonymity would be much harder to maintain. But in the late 70s and early 80s, he found a perfect era to disappear into. This was the perfect era to reinvent himself, and that was the perfect era to kill. His eventual capture really didn't bring closure so much as it brought answers. It confirmed fears and connected scattered tragedies. It brought families into packed courtrooms where they stared at a man who refused to meet their eyes. And it gave prosecutors enough evidence to ensure he would never walk free again. In the end, Siebert died not by execution, but by illness. Pancreatic cancer did take him slowly and painfully. Which honestly is a fate far easier than the terror he inflicted on his victim, but it is what it is. He's not going to do it anymore. He's done. But when I tell these stories, we got to make sure we remember the lives he destroyed, not the man who took them. Sherry Weathers, her children, Lyndon Jarman, the many others who never had a chance to see his justice carried to conclusion. So, as I start this A to Z journey through the American serial killers, Alabama sets the tone, and it's not with its most famous case. It's not with the one that dominates documentaries or podcasts, but this is a case that shows how violence can hide in very quiet corners of everyday life, how danger doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. And if nothing else, Siebert's story is a reminder of why I tell these stories on the murder side of the house, not to sensationalize, not to glorify, but to remember the victims and to understand, to learn, to make sure the people behind the headlines are not forgotten. Next week, I will move on to another state, our next state, a new case and a new killer. There will be a new chapter in this very dark.
You're doing 50 by 50 for 50? Nice.
I don't know that I'll do it in a row, but I am going to do another one next week. As I go through this very dark but I think it's a necessary explanation of America's history of violence. Alabama was first for a reason, because sometimes the quiet one leaves the deepest echoes, and Daniel Lee Siebert's echo that was very cold and sharp and unforgettable, it still lingers today. And that's the story of Daniel Lee Siebert and my first step in A to Z.
Nice. Thanks, sir.
You bet. Appreciate you taking that journey with me. I know it was a long one. We had a couple of long episodes, but I think we had a lot of good stuff here. So,
yep, good stuff.
With that, that will take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find us on nerderymurdery.com, our hub, our website for everything about us. You'll find links, you'll find pictures, and you'll find the link to our YouTube page with Zig so often update.
Yeah, check these out. You'll actually get some good scenes of character development in this one. I think you might like it.
Awesome. Appreciate all the work on that.
Thanks, sir.
You'll also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something from there. Our merchandise, along with our patrons, you can find the link to our Patreon on our website, but that the people who donate to that and purchase our merchandise, they go to the costs that are associated with this show. It is not free. It costs for our uploads for our website and everything to bring you this content each and every week, so we do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but certainly not least, no, I'm going to back up. One more thing you can do that's completely free to you and only takes a couple minutes is please leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information that we talk about. And now, last but certainly not least, to our good friend Chuck. You can go to sleep now.
Good night, Chuck.
Good night, Chuck. With that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdering.
Give the music.
Whispers in the static, shadows deep. Stories of the strange and secrets we keep. Nerd